The pervasive interconnectedness among intelligences or conscious beings implies the individuality of each connected being, but it also implies the possibility of a group identity, also known as collective consciousness or group mind. Dr. Dean Radin has found that there is such a thing as a group consciousness. There's a broad spectrum as to what is meant by group mind or collective consciousness. At one end of the spectrum is the idea that collective consciousness is simply a set of shared beliefs. Of course, sharing common beliefs, ideas, and desires can unify a people. This is the whole idea of the Constitution of the United States. At the other end of the spectrum, and the meaning we will primarily consider, is collective consciousness as a unity of conscious minds. Often, this is called a group mind. The group mind, in reality, becomes a single conscious entity. This single conscious entity has the power to form a unified field of consciousness, for the lack of a better term. As the primary influence of consciousness is one of coherence or organization, a group of individuals can collectively focus their attention on one common object and thus affect that object. The power of the unifying field is proportional to the number in the group and the strength of their combined focus, among other things. Now, we really don't have a precise word to define the concept of collective consciousness and its physical effects. Science uses the term field to describe invisible forces such as gravity and magnetism. Broadly speaking, a field is simply an area in which a particular effect is manifest. For our purposes, field consciousness is an area where the effects of a group mind exist. Or, as Dean Radin put it, it is a continuum of non-local intelligence which permeates time and space. This is the very idea of panpsychism, which we have previously discussed, and the light of Christ, which is in everything and fills the immensity of space. This continuum of consciousness, or field consciousness, when focused as a unity, has a greater power to affect matter than does an individual conscious being. This enhanced power has been demonstrated in numerous experiments. The Global Consciousness Project has studied the effect focused attention, not intention, has upon random systems, particularly random number generators or RNGs. The project has placed scores of RNGs throughout the world. These devices generate either ones or zeros randomly. Over time, the ratio between ones and zeros should be about 50-50. However, this ratio changes to a more ordered one, favoring ones or zeros during large-scale events witnessed simultaneously by millions of people throughout the globe. Dean Radin explains.
The Global Consciousness Project is an evolutionary step out of 50 years of prior experiments. The experiments were looking at the relationship between mind and matter, and specifically intention and the behavior of the physical world. I mean, it all devolves back into the question, what is the role of mind in the physical world? Then in the 1990s, Roger Nelson at Princeton got the idea that maybe intention was only a piece of the puzzle, and maybe attention was also important. That the act of attending, which we think of internally, attending is a kind of coherent mental state. You're focusing in on one thing. And if we can think of that as not simply being in your head, but being out there as well, then when you attend to something, it changes. and it changes in the direction of coherence. So if the target of your attention is randomness, then a cohered random system is, by definition, more orderly, becomes ordered. And so you can detect that order through statistics easily.
The first experiment of this type used meditation groups. After hundreds of tests, it was found that RNGs became less random due only to the meditation of the group, attention and not intention.
So he started doing experiments where he'd take a random number generator, an electronic circuit, and put it in the vicinity of a group that was meditating, thinking that this would create a large amount of coherent attention. Sometimes people knew the random generator was there, and sometimes they didn't know. And he wanted to see whether the randomness would become orderly during the meditation. And after hundreds of such tests by Roger and me and a bunch of our colleagues, we came to the conclusion that it does become less random in a context where we can infer that there's mental coherence going on, sometimes due only to attention.
In 1994, the Global Consciousness Project used a scheduled event to test the effect of group attention on random number generators. The reading of the verdict of the OJ Simpson trial was selected because it was expected to draw hundreds of millions of viewers worldwide, focused on a single event at the same moment. As expected, the event captured the attention of the world, and the attention caused the RNGs to be more ordered.
So I think it was 1994, I did an experiment before, during, and after the announcement of the OJ Simpson verdict in his murder trial. And this was a unique period in history in that it was the first time that I'm aware of, in modern time anyway, first time where there's actually one other I can think of, which was landing on the moon. But a first instance where hundreds of millions of people around the world knew that something interesting was going to happen at a stroke of a couple of seconds in the future. It was a reading of a verdict which would either say guilty or not guilty. And so imagine the amount of attention that's slowly focusing up to that moment. I figured this would make a great experiment because I could have a whole bunch of random number generators going, and we can look in time sequence what is happening to the randomness as we approach the moment of announcement of the verdict, where we have maybe 1 billion people paying attention to it. So I did that. I had 5 random number generators going, 4 in the US and 1 in Europe, and tracked what was happening to the randomness as we got closer and closer to the verdict and the verdict being read and afterwards. And we found very clear evidence that there was a sudden peak in order in the random generators within seconds of the verdict being read.
Of course, not all significant events are scheduled. In order to capture unanticipated events, the project set up an automated system where RNGs were positioned worldwide and ran continuously.
So we decided to create a system that would be completely automatically running 24/7 with random number generators located in places around the world. So today, as of today, the project is going for 10 years. There's roughly 70 random generators in cities around the world, and it's been running for pretty much continuously for 10 years. So the most dramatic event that occurred, and oh, by the way, the reason we did this is because we knew that events would occur that we couldn't predict, and that would attract a lot of attention. We wanted to see what would happen under those cases.
The system was up and running when the terrorist attacks occurred on September 11th of 2001. The GCP found that there was unmistakable evidence that randomness disappeared at the time of the attacks.
So the best example in the worst case was 9/11. So 9/11 was not predicted as far as most people knew. And we had 37 random number generators, maybe 36 or 37 running at that time. And we were then able to look and see what was happening to randomness before, during, and after 9/11. And we subsequently, a bunch of us did an analysis, and we published it in Foundations of Physics Letters, which is a physics journal. Because what we found was unmistakable evidence that the randomness in all 36 generators went away.
What was also discovered was that the orderliness of the random number generators preceded the first event by hours. This suggests that the attention of the world had also become coherent hours before the event. As Dr. Radin had claimed, consciousness is not bound by time or space.
Slightly before 9/11, at 9/11, a little bit after, and then it went back to baseline. So you have a baseline randomness statistically. You have 9/11 approaching about 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours before 9/11. The whole system, the whole random system became orderly. And then 9/11 occurred, and it went through all kinds of strange random or non-random effects, and then it balanced out after a while and went back to being orderly.
Over the years, the Global Consciousness Project has conducted over 200 of these random tests with the same results. Large-scale group attention consistently caused the RNGs to be less random.
This is one of now over 200 such events, things like gigantic tsunamis, earthquakes, political events, the death of celebrities, unexpected things. Those kind of events go into our database. And what we do then is we have this ongoing, continuous random stream from around the world. We have a formal way of saying, well, this event is either predicted or an event occurs, and we go back later and we analyze the result through a standard method that we use. And we can see whether this worldwide random system is behaving randomly or not. And when you look at composite over the 200-some events, the odds against chance are over 1,000,000 to 1 now. So we have good statistical reasons to believe that the random generators are not behaving randomly when there are large-scale events that attract a lot of attention.
It is very clear from the tests performed by the Global Consciousness Project that group attention can affect the physical world, imposing order upon random systems. The question now becomes, can group intention also affect the physical world, and can it do so at a higher rate of effectiveness over an individual? The answer, as might be expected, is yes. 2 exploratory studies were performed to study the effects of distant healing through time and space. In both cases, healing intention was directed by groups. Umbanda is a primarily Brazilian religion that blends several belief systems. The word itself means magic and the art of healing. Its spiritual leaders are psychic mediums who are believed to have the ability to communicate with the spirits of the dead in behalf of the living. The results of both tests found that directed healing intention was effective and that group intention was stronger than that of an individual intention. Directing group healing intent is the very basis of LDS temple prayer circles, known as the True Order of Prayer. Temple initiates are asked to form a circle around the altar and then, as a group, direct their faith towards the names of the sick and afflicted on the altar. Unity within the group is essential. Science would call this coherence. The ordinance draws on the gospel principle of oneness of mind and heart. That is, there must be the gospel equivalent of a coherent group mind. The Apostle Paul repeatedly counseled the saints of his time to be of one mind. He gave the counsel to the Corinthians. And to the Romans twice. And to the Philippians 3 times. Most commentators believe that Paul is simply asking the saints to become unified and live in harmony with each other. The LDS New Testament Student Manual believes that Paul was preaching unity among the early church members. Unity, in this sense, refers to a condition or state of harmony and accord. According to this understanding, Paul is cautioning the saints against infighting or internal strife. However, there is more to Paul's statement than a call to harmony. In the 6 verses just quoted, Paul uses the same Greek expression, which literally means to think the same thing. While thinking the same thing within a group certainly leads to a form of harmony, it presupposes that the group, that is, the members of the church Paul addresses, have a common object that serves as their focus of thinking. A group focusing on thinking the same thing creates coherence among the group, or in other words, a group mind. In his epistle to the Ephesians, Paul called this one mind a unity of the faith. And, as we learned from Joseph Smith, faith is simply mental exertion. To be clear, when Paul speaks of a unity of faith, he's not speaking of a common belief or religion. He's talking about faith as the active principle of belief, trust, and confidence. That is, the apostle is again exhorting the saints to become of one mind in their exercise of faith in the common object of their intention, the Son of God. The concept of having one mind is expressed in several ways throughout the Scriptures. The saints have also been commanded to be of one mind and one heart. The Book of Mormon patriarch and prophet Lehi counseled his sons to be of one mind and one heart. In our day, the Lord commanded the saints to be one of heart and mind as they gathered to the New Jerusalem. Alternatively, the saints at the time of the New Testament apostles had all things in common due to their having one heart and one soul. The Greek translated as heart and soul are cardia and psyche, respectively. Cardia, the heart, consistent with the ancient understanding, was the seat of the mind, not the brain. Psyche was the animating force. To complicate things further, Paul used another duality to characterize the unity of the saints: one spirit and one mind. In this case, the King James translators used mind for psyche and not soul as in Acts. Psyche, not cardia, is now the mind. Paul uses pneuma for spirit. The Apostle Peter, in his first epistle, used an entirely different organ to characterize oneness of mind. Peter used homophron, which is translated as of one mind. Homophron has 2 roots. Homo meaning same as, and phren referring to the midriff of the body, but also to the mind. Phren is also the root for the English term diaphragm. Phren is also the root of phrenology, the study of the bumps on the skull to determine or predict mental traits. Be this as it may, mind is an aspect of the light of Christ in consciousness and is not specific to any one organ of the body. To believe that the brain or any other organ of the body is the origin or center of consciousness or the light of Christ is the cause of the mind-body problem in the first place. The same concept of heart as mind is found in the Old Testament. The Lord told Jeremiah that when he will have gathered Israel into the latter days, he will give them one heart and one way, or purpose. The Lord reiterated the promise to Ezekiel. In his prophecy, he will give his people one heart and a new spirit. In both prophecies, the Hebrew translated as heart is lab, like the Greek cardia. Lab refers to the heart, but also the inner man and the mind. The new spirit of Ezekiel is the Hebrew ruach. It is the equivalent to the Greek pneuma, used by Paul for spirit. Both signify wind, breath, or spirit. Now, what we must understand when reading these translations is that the one heart or one mind of a group cannot refer to a collective organ of the body. They must refer to something else entirely. And perhaps the most familiar example to Latter-day Saints was ancient Zion. The people of Zion were of one heart and one mind. The inhabitants of Zion dwelt with one mind and one heart in righteousness, meaning that their social unity was focused solely on the principles of righteousness. Not only were the saints of Zion unified in heart, they were purified in heart. The power of mind or consciousness comes both from the unity of a group, also called coherence, but also from purity, the perfect alignment with the moral structure of the universe. Indeed, this is the basis for union required in the celestial kingdom. Ancient Zion had reached this perfect union of mind and heart. There was no poor among them, and they were taken up into heaven. While neither the brain or heart can be the origin of the human mind, let alone a group mind, there is growing evidence that both organs play a role in human perception and cognition. Both brain and heart act as independent sensory and processing centers. Both organs communicate with each other within the complex interconnected system known as the human body. In other words, There may be a physical basis to the belief that the mind is both heart and head. Still, scientists are beginning to understand that it is not the organs themselves, but something else below the conscious layer that is the basis for thought and emotion. Called energetics, it is the real driver of our physical body and its biological systems.
We use the term energetics to refer to the systems that we can't see or touch. For example, our thoughts, emotions, and intuitions. The mind and heart feelings are energetic sources that underlie our thoughts and emotions. They're primary drivers of our biological systems and have a powerful influence on our behaviors, choices, and results.
Even more telling is that the energetic heart and brain respond to future events before they occur. This is a hallmark of consciousness, which is not bound by space and time. When the heart and brain are coherent, working harmoniously together, they become as one, creating synergy. This can be called personal coherence.
Research shows that when we shift into a coherent state, the heart and brain operate synergistically, like two systems that mesh into one.
Synergy is the state where the combined effect of two or more systems, like the heart and brain, is greater than the sum of their individual parts. The synergy between heart and mind at the unconscious energetic level is also present between individuals and within groups. Coherence is a group phenomenon. This can be called social coherence.
Research conducted in our laboratories has confirmed that when an individual is in heart coherence, the heart radiates a more coherent electromagnetic energy field that can benefit people, animals, and the environment. A growing body of scientific evidence suggests that when there is coherent group cooperation, it results in increased flow, effectiveness, and the potential for higher outcomes. It seems as though the group participants are not only in sync, but are communicating on an unseen energetic level.
As within an individual, energetic coherence not only influences the effectiveness of groups of individuals, but also their biological systems. Furthermore, there is evidence to suggest that this energetic interconnectedness includes all living systems on Earth and the Earth itself.
Scientific evidence provides support for a global field environment that connects all living systems and consciousness. Many scientists believe that a feedback loop exists between all humans and the Earth's energetic systems.
The principle is that when an energetic system, what we have called consciousness or the light of Christ, becomes coherent at any level, personal, interpersonal, global, or beyond, the associated physical or biological systems also become coherent. They develop synergy. Now, this coherence, the harmonious connectiveness between parts or people or any living beings, forms what science calls a system. It becomes a unified whole.
We are working together with other initiatives to realize the increased effectiveness of collective intention and cooperation.